As the sun sets on a quiet rural town, a stranded woman stands helplessly beside her old sedan when a kind mechanic stops to offer assistance. His grease-stained hands and genuine smile are a stark contrast to the cutthroat world she secretly rules as one of the wealthiest people on earth. Deliberately traveling in an ordinary car to stay unnoticed, she finds herself drawn to his authenticity, a rare gift in her world of fake smiles and hidden agendas. For a moment, she feels like just another person, just Elena, and that feeling is worth more than her billions. But as their connection deepens, her secret looms larger, threatening to destroy the one real thing she's found in a world built on pretense. Will her deception cost her the chance at true love? What happens when someone who has everything discovers the one thing money can't buy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old sedan sputtered and died just as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting Pine Grove's main street in shades of amber and gold. Elena Matthews, though no one in this tiny town would recognize that name, let out a frustrated sigh as she guided her deliberately chosen, perfectly ordinary car to the side of the road. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could buy every building on this street without denting her fortune, yet here she was, stranded like any other traveler. Steam rose from under the hood, curling into the cooling evening air. Elena stepped out, her designer boots hitting the dusty pavement with a soft thud. She'd chosen her outfit carefully: simple jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a light jacket. Expensive pieces that looked deceptively ordinary. No one would guess. The woman standing helplessly beside the broken-down car was worth billions. The smell of motor oil and fresh-baked bread drifted from opposite ends of the street. Elena lifted the hood, then immediately regretted it as a fresh cloud of steam rushed out. She didn't know the first thing about engines. Her world was one of boardrooms and investment portfolios, not carburetors and spark plugs. Need a hand? The voice was warm, tinged with genuine concern, rather than the calculated sympathy she was used to. Elena turned to find a tall man approaching, wiping his grease-stained hands on a red shop rag. His coveralls bore the name Jack's Auto Repair across the chest, and beneath them she could see well-worn work boots and shoulders shaped by honest labor rather than expensive personal trainers. "Car just died on me," Elena admitted, surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him. No pretense, no agenda, just a simple exchange between two people. When was the last time she'd had one of those? Jack, she assumed that was his name, approached. The engine with practiced ease. His smile reached his eyes, creating little crinkles at the corners that spoke of someone who laughed often and meant it. "Let's take a look, shall we?" he said, already leaning in to inspect the problem. Elena watched him work, fascinated by the confidence in his movements. Here was someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was doing. No masks, no pretenses. In her world, such authenticity was rarer than the diamonds she'd left locked in her penthouse safe. "Looks like your radiator hose is shot," he announced, after a few minutes. "Not a quick fix, I'm afraid. Shop's closed for the day, but I can have it towed and take a proper look first thing tomorrow." He straightened up, and their eyes met. Something electric passed between them, making them both pause. For a moment, Elena forgot about her empire, her responsibilities, the constant pressure of being Elena Matthews, CEO and billionaire. Here, in this small town as the sun set and crickets began their evening chorus, she was just a woman with a broken-down car, talking to a kind mechanic with honest eyes. If only she could keep it that way. "Thank you," she said softly, meaning it more than he could know. "I'd appreciate that." As Jack called the tow truck, Elena looked around at the quiet town, its storefronts glowing warmly in the dusk. She hadn't planned on stopping here, hadn't planned on stopping anywhere, really. She just needed to escape, to drive without a destination, to breathe without the weight of her world on her shoulders. Maybe, she thought, watching Jack's easy smile as he explained what needed to be done, some breakdowns were meant to happen. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that this simple mechanical failure would lead to the most genuine connection she'd ever known. But first, she'd have to decide if true love was worth the price of truth itself. The setting sun cast long shadows across Pine Grove's main street as Jack's tow truck pulled Elena's sedan into his shop's parking lot. The neon open sign had already been switched off, but warm light spilled from the garage's interior, where various tools hung in neat rows along the walls. The space smelled of motor oil and something else, perhaps decades of honest work, Elena mused. "I'll do a full diagnostic first thing tomorrow morning," Jack said, helping her retrieve her single duffel bag from the trunk, another calculated choice to maintain her cover. "But from what I can see, we're looking at least 2 or 3 days for parts to arrive." Elena's heart skipped. 3 days in this tiny town hadn't been part of her plan, but something about Jack's earnest expression made the prospect less daunting. "Is there anywhere I can stay?" she asked, though her platinum credit cards could probably buy her any house on this street. "Mrs. Henderson's B&B is just 2 blocks down," Jack replied, pointing down the tree-lined street. "Best blueberry pancakes in 3 counties. Tell her Jack sent you. She always has a soft spot for stranded travelers." As they walked together, Elena noticed how people waved to Jack from their porches. A teenage girl on a bicycle called out, "Thanks for fixing my brakes." "Mr. Morrison!" An elderly man tending his garden shouted, "Jack, Sunday dinner's still on." Each interaction revealed another thread in the tight-knit fabric of this community. The B&B turned out to be a lovingly maintained Victorian house, its yellow paint warm in the evening light. Flower boxes hung from every window, and a tabby cat dozed on the wraparound porch. Before they reached the steps, the front door swung open, revealing a plump woman in her 60s, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "Jack Morrison, bringing me another stray," she called out, her voice warm with affection. "You know I was about to close the kitchen." "Mrs. H, this is Elena. Her car needs some work, might be a few days." Jack's hand briefly touched Elena's shoulder, sending an unexpected warmth through her body. "Think you could work your magic?" Mrs. Henderson's keen eyes studied Eleanor, and for a terrifying moment she feared the woman would recognize her from some financial magazine. Instead, she just smiled and said, "Honey, you look like you could use a hot meal and a soft bed. Come on in." As Jack bid them good night, Elena found herself wishing he would stay. Instead, she watched him walk back toward his shop, his silhouette, straight and sure in the deepening twilight. When she turned back, Mrs. Henderson was watching her with knowing eyes. "Jack's a good man," the older woman said simply, leading Elena into a cozy sitting room filled with handmade quilts and the scent of fresh-baked cookies. "Fixed my furnace last winter and wouldn't take a dime, said neighbors help neighbors." Elena sank into a plush armchair, overwhelmed by the genuine warmth of this place. In her world, every interaction was a transaction, every kindness came with a price tag. Here, in this room with its mismatched furniture and family photos, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. "Now then," Mrs. Henderson said, setting a plate of cookies and a cup of tea before her, "tell me what brings you to our little corner of the world." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug, wondering how to explain that she was running from everything and nothing at the same time. "Just needed a change of scenery," she said softly. "I didn't expect to stop here, but sometimes the best things in life are unexpected," Mrs. Henderson finished, patting Elena's hand. "Welcome to Pine Grove, dear. Something tells me you might find exactly what you're looking for here." As Elena lay in bed that night, in a room that smelled of lavender and fresh linens, she thought about Jack's smile, about the way this town seemed to operate on trust and kindness rather than profits and power. For the first time in years, she fell asleep without checking her stock portfolio or answering urgent emails. Instead, she dreamed of grease-stained hands and honest eyes, and a world where she could just be Elena. Morning light filtered through lace curtains as Elena woke to the unfamiliar sound of birdsong rather than city traffic. For a moment, she reached for her phone, a reflexive gesture born from years of 5 a.m. conference calls and pre-market trading. Updates. Instead, her hand found a handwritten note from Mrs. Henderson about breakfast being served until 9. Alone in her room, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of truth. She opened her laptop, careful to angle it away from the door, and logged into her secure email. Hundreds of messages demanded her attention, but one from her assistant stood out. Board members asking about your whereabouts. Told them you're taking a brief personal retreat. Call ASAP. Eleanor closed the laptop with a quiet click. She thought about the last board meeting, where she'd sat at the head of a gleaming mahogany table, surrounded by men twice her age who'd never quite accepted that Charles Matthews' daughter had outmaneuvered them all to become CEO. She remembered the whispers when she'd taken over at 28 after her father's death, how they'd expected her to fail, to crack under pressure, to be nothing more than a pretty figurehead. Instead, she doubled the company's value in 5 years. Every decision, every acquisition, every ruthless move had been calculated to prove herself worthy of her father's legacy. But lately, sitting in her penthouse office overlooking Manhattan, she'd found herself wondering, worthy to whom? The smell of coffee and bacon drew her downstairs, where she found Mrs. Henderson's dining room already busy with guests. A young couple on their honeymoon, an older man who introduced himself as a traveling salesman, and a woman writing in a journal all shared the large table. No one gave Elena a second glance. No recognition, no calculating looks, no subtle attempts to curry favor. The anonymity felt like a warm blanket. Sleep well, dear? Mrs. Henderson appeared with a stack of blueberry pancakes that made Elena's usual protein smoothie seem like cruel punishment. Jack called earlier, said he'd be ready to show you what's wrong with your car whenever you'd like to head over. Elena's heart did an unexpected flutter at the mention of his name. She took her time walking to the garage, watching Pine Grove wake up. The local diner was doing brisk business, its windows fogged from coffee steam. The hardware store owner was arranging garden tools on the sidewalk, while the bookshop across the street had just flipped its sign to open. At Jack's garage, she found him already at work, his broad shoulders under his coveralls bent over an elderly woman's car. "Mrs. Davis, I've told you before. You don't need to bring me cookies every time I check your oil," he was saying, though he accepted the wrapped package with genuine gratitude. "Hush now," the older woman replied, patting his cheek. "If I don't feed you, who will? All work and no cookies makes Jack a dull boy." She noticed Elena and smiled warmly. "Oh, you must be the stranded traveler everyone's talking about. I'm Margaret Davis. I taught this young man in 3rd grade, if you can believe it. Still can't get him to accept proper payment for his work." Jack's ears reddened slightly. "Proper payment doesn't always mean money, Mrs. Davis." His eyes met Elena's, and something in her chest tightened. In her world, everything had a price tag. Everything could be bought, sold, leveraged. But here was a man who measured wealth in cookies and kindness. After Mrs. Davis left, Jack showed Elena her car's engine, explaining the problem in terms she could understand without being condescending. She found herself studying his hands as he pointed out various components. Strong, capable hands that built and fixed things rather than just signing documents and swiping credit cards. "My father used to own this place," Jack said as he worked, his voice carrying a hint of pride. "Taught me everything I know about cars and people. He always said both need regular maintenance and honest handling. He glanced up at her. What? About your family? What did they teach you? Elena's throat tightened. She thought about her father's lessons in corporate strategy, her mother's instructions on maintaining the proper image, the weight of expectations that had been placed on her shoulders since childhood. My father taught me about responsibility, she said carefully. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. About taking care of what's yours. Jack nodded, seeming to hear what she wasn't saying. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out what really is yours, he said quietly, then turned back to the engine. Elena watched him work, thinking about masks and responsibilities, about choices and consequences. In New York, her calendar was planned months in advance. Every minute accounted. For every interaction, choreographed. Here, time seemed to move differently, measured in genuine smiles and simple kindnesses. She wondered, not for the first time, which world was more real. The day unfolded differently than any in Elena's recent memory. No urgent meetings, no crisis calls, no endless stream of emails demanding immediate attention. Instead, she found herself wandering Pine Grove's streets, discovering its hidden charms with the wide-eyed wonder of a child. The local bookstore, Pine and Pages, welcomed her with the scent of old books and fresh coffee. The elderly owner, Mr. Wilson, didn't try to sell her anything. Instead, he shared stories about the town's history while showing her treasured first editions kept behind glass. Books are like people, he mused, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The most valuable ones often have the most weathered covers. Around noon, Jack appeared at the bookstore's door, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Thought I might find you here," he said, his smile genuine. "I'm taking my lunch break. Care to join me? There's a place I'd like to show you." Elena followed him through town, past the diner and the post office, until they reached a small path leading up a gentle hill. At the top stood a massive oak tree, its branches spreading wide to create a natural canopy. Below it sat a simple wooden bench, weathered by years of sun and rain. "My father built this bench," Jack said, pulling a brown paper bag from his pocket. "Said everyone needs a place to step back and breathe sometimes." He opened the bag, revealing 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. "Hope you like turkey. Sally at the diner makes the best." Elena accepted the sandwich, touched by the simple thoughtfulness of the gesture. In her world, lunch meant power meetings. At Michelin-starred restaurants, every bite calculated for maximum networking effect. This, sitting on a worn bench under an ancient oak, eating a homemade sandwich with a mechanic, should have felt beneath her. Instead, it felt like finally being able to breathe. "Tell me about your work," she said, genuinely curious about his life. "What's it like, fixing things every day?" Jack's eyes lit up as he talked about his garage, about the satisfaction of solving problems and helping people. "Every car has a story," he explained. "Like Mrs. Davis's Buick, it was her late husband's. She could buy a newer one, but that car holds memories, so I keep it running." He glanced at her. "What about you? What do you do?" Elena's heart skipped. She'd prepared for this question, but facing Jack's honest interest made lying harder. "I work in business management," she said carefully, "helping companies run more efficiently." It wasn't technically a lie, but the omission felt heavy on her tongue. "Sounds complicated," Jack said, not pressing for details. Instead, he pointed to a hawk circling overhead. "See that? Red-tailed hawk. They mate for life, you know. Choose one partner and stick with them through everything." As they watched the hawk soar, their hands rested inches apart on the bench. Elena felt the distance like a physical ache, wondering what it would be like to close that gap, to let herself reach out and touch someone without calculating the consequences. The afternoon light shifted, reminding Jack of the time. "I should get back," he said reluctantly, "but maybe we could do this again tomorrow. The parts for your car won't be in until Thursday at least." "I'd like that," Elena replied softly, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Walking back through town, Eleanor noticed things she'd missed before. The way people stopped to chat on street corners, sharing news and laughter. The handwritten "Get Well Soon" cards in the pharmacy window for someone named Betty. The Little League team practicing in the park, their coach teaching them about more than just baseball. Back at Mrs. Henderson's, Elena found herself drawn into an impromptu afternoon tea with two other guests. They talked about nothing and everything. Garden tips, favorite books, childhood memories. No one asked about her stock portfolio or her 5-year business strategy. No one cared about her net worth or her corporate influence. As evening approached, Elena sat on the B&B's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. A gentle breeze carried the scent of Mrs. Henderson's rose garden, and somewhere nearby, wind chimes played a soft melody. Her phone buzzed with another urgent email from her assistant, but for the first time in years, Elena let it wait. Instead, she thought about honest smiles and turkey sandwiches, about red-tailed hawks and the luxury of simply being present in a moment. She thought about Jack and the way he looked at her, not as a CEO, not as a Matthews, but just as Elena. And for the first time, she understood how dangerous that could be. Elena jolted awake at 3 a.m. to the insistent buzzing of her phone, 27 missed calls, 43 text messages. Her stomach dropped as she saw the latest message from her CFO. Urgent. Chinese merger falling apart. Need immediate decision. Competitor making hostile move. Her fingers trembled as she slipped out of bed, careful not to let her heels click on Mrs. Henderson's hardwood floors. The old Victorian house creaked with nighttime settling sounds as she made her way to the small garden at the back, where she could talk without being overheard. "Thomas," she whispered into the phone, her CEO voice sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. "Talk to me." "Elena, thank God. Wu International is backing out. They're saying without your personal presence at the negotiations." A car passing on the street made her duck deeper into the shadows. "They're entertaining an offer from Richardson Global. We need you back in New York. Now. $5 billion. That's what this merger was worth. $5 billion in assets, thousands of jobs, years of careful planning, all potentially unraveling because she'd chosen this week to play small-town tourist. "Listen carefully," she commanded, her voice low but sharp. "Call Benjamin at legal. Have him draft." She continued laying out a complex strategy, her mind racing through contingencies and power plays she could execute even from this distance. The sky began to lighten as she finished the last call. She'd saved the deal, for now, but she knew there would be more fires to fight. There always were. Exhausted, Elena made her way to the kitchen, desperate for coffee. She froze in the doorway. Jack stood there, holding 2 steaming mugs, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. H. said you might need this," he said, offering her one of the cups. "She heard you up early, thought you might appreciate some fuel." Elena's heart pounded. How long have you been here?" "Just came in, bringing Mrs. H. some parts she needed for her kitchen sink." He studied her face. "Rough night?" She accepted the coffee, trying to hide how her hands shook. "Just work stuff. Couldn't sleep." The lies were getting harder, sticking in her throat like honey turned to glue. "Must be important work," he said carefully, "keeping you up at 3 in the morning." Elena took a long sip of coffee to avoid responding. The rich liquid was exactly what she needed, and she wondered if Mrs. Henderson had somehow known that too. "Sometimes things just can't wait," she finally said. Jack leaned against the counter, his own mug cradled in those capable hands she'd grown to admire. "You know, my dad used to say that the things that can't wait are usually the things that need waiting the most." Their eyes met over their coffee cups, and Elena felt the weight of her deception, like a physical pressure in her chest. Here was a man who probably hadn't told a lie in his life, offering wisdom and coffee to a woman whose entire presence in his town was built on falsehood. "Jack, she started, but the sudden ping of her phone cut her off. Another crisis, another decision needed, another reminder of who she really was. "I should go," she said quickly, clutching her coffee like a shield. "Thank you for the coffee." As she hurried back to her room, she heard Jack talking quietly with Mrs. Henderson. In the kitchen, their gentle laughter felt like an accusation. Every step up the stairs reminded her of the distance between their worlds, a distance that seemed to grow with each passing moment. Back in her room, Eleanor sat at the small desk by the window, watching the sun rise over Pine Grove. Her phone continued to buzz with messages from a world where billions hung in the balance, where every decision affected thousands of lives, where Elena Matthews was a name that opened doors and struck fear in competitors' hearts. But for the first time in her career, those messages didn't feel like power. They felt like chains. The morning sun had already warmed the garage's concrete floor when Elena arrived, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She'd spent an hour drafting emails on her laptop, fighting fires across time zones, but now she needed something else, something real. Jack looked up from under the hood of a minivan, surprise and pleasure mixing in his expression. "You're becoming a regular Pine Grove citizen," he said, accepting the coffee. "He even remembered the extra sugar." "Least I could do after you." "Saved me with coffee this morning," she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the memory of her pre-dawn crisis. She glanced around the garage, taking in the organized chaos of tools and parts. "Need any help?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "You know anything about cars?" "No," Elena admitted, then added with a small smile, "But I'm a quick learner. Always have been." That at least was true. She'd learned to run a multinational corporation at 28. Surely she could handle basic auto repair. "All right then," Jack said, grabbing a spare shop rag. Lesson 1. How to check the oil without ruining your clothes. Hours slipped by as Jack taught her the basics. Elena found herself fascinated, not just by the mechanics of engines, but by the way Jack explained things. Patient, clear, never making her feel stupid for asking questions. In her world, knowledge was power, carefully guarded and strategically shared. Here, Jack gave it freely, his face lighting up when she grasped a new concept. "Hand me that wrench," he asked, pointing to his toolbox. As she passed it to him, their fingers brushed. Electricity seemed to spark between them, making them both pause. For a moment, they stood frozen, the wrench a connection point between 2 worlds. Then a voice called from the garage entrance, "Jack, got a minute?" They stepped apart as an elderly man hobbled in, leaning heavily on a cane. "Mr. Peterson," Jack said warmly. "How's that hip doing?" "Better since the surgery," the old man replied. "But my truck's making that noise again." He noticed Elena and smiled. "Well, who's this? Don't usually see such pretty helpers in Jack's garage." "This is Elena," Jack said, and she caught something in his voice when he said her name, something that made her heart skip. "She's learning the trade while her car gets fixed." "Learning the trade, eh?" Mr. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "Jack's a good teacher. Taught my granddaughter how to change her own oil last summer. Wouldn't take a dime for the lesson, said it was his duty to pass on knowledge." Elena watched as Jack examined Mr. Peterson's truck, explaining each step to her while simultaneously reassuring the old man about the simple fix needed. She found herself admiring not just his technical skill, but the way he treated everyone who came into his shop with respect, patience, and genuine care. "You're good with people," she said later, as they cleaned tools together. "Everyone in town seems to trust you." Jack shrugged, but she caught the hint of pride in his expression. "Trust has to be earned," he said, "and kept." That's something my father taught me. Once you break someone's trust, it's harder to fix than any engine. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She turned away, pretending to organize socket wrenches while fighting the tightness in her throat. Every moment she spent with Jack, every genuine smile she received from the townspeople, felt increasingly tainted by her deception. "Hey," Jack's voice was soft behind her. "You okay?" She turned to find him closer than expected, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to smell engine oil and coffee, and something uniquely him. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the kind of response she'd given 1,000 times in board meetings and press conferences, but Jack didn't move away. Instead, he reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and brushed a smudge of oil from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was gentle, careful, but it sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "You know," he said quietly, "for someone who's supposed to be just passing through, you fit in pretty well here." Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could focus on was the rough warmth of his hand against her cheek, the honest concern in his eyes, and the growing certainty that she was falling for exactly the kind of man who would never forgive her lies. "Jack, she started, but once again her phone buzzed in her pocket, the real world, her world, demanding attention. She stepped back, breaking the moment. "I should go. Mrs. Henderson's probably wondering where I am for lunch." This time, as she walked away, she could feel Jack's eyes on her back, and she wondered if, somehow, he could see right through her carefully constructed facade to the truth she was desperately trying to hide. Not just about who she was, but about what she was beginning to feel for him. The Pine Grove Gazette wasn't much of a newspaper by New York standards. 8 pages of local news, printed weekly, with more photos of children's baseball games than breaking stories. But when Elena walked into Sally's diner for her now regular morning coffee, she found Sarah Chen, the paper's only reporter, studying her with uncomfortable intensity over a notepad. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah asked, sliding into Elena's booth before she could answer. "I'm doing a piece on visitors to Pine Grove, human interest stuff." Her smile was friendly, but her eyes held the sharp look Elena recognized from years of dealing with financial reporters, the look of someone who sensed a story. "I'm not very interesting," Elena said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "Just waiting for my car to be fixed." Sarah made a note. "And yet you've been here almost a week, spending an awful lot of time at Jack's garage. People are talking." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "He's teaching me about cars, that's all." "Sure." Sarah's pen tapped against her notepad. "It's just, you seem familiar somehow, like I've seen your face before. And those shoes you're wearing, they're Louboutins, aren't they? Not exactly standard tourist wear in Pine Grove." Before Elena could respond, a shadow fell across their table. "Sarah!" Jack's voice carried a warning note she'd never heard before. "Don't you have that Little League championship to cover?" "Just doing my job, Jack." Sarah gathered her things, but her eyes lingered on Eleanor. "Everyone has a story. Some are just more interesting than others." After she left, Jack slid into the booth across from Eleanor. "Sorry about that. Sarah's a good person, but she can be persistent. She thinks uncovering some big story will get her a job at a major paper." "It's fine," Elena said, though her heart was racing. She'd been careless, wearing her usual clothes, falling into familiar patterns. One photo, one quick internet search, and her carefully constructed piece would shatter. "You know," Jack said, "carefully, whatever you're running from or hiding from, this is a small town. People talk, but they also protect their own." Elena looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers, "that sometimes people come here needing a fresh start or a break from their real lives. And Pine Grove's pretty good at giving them space to figure things out. The kindness in his voice made her eyes burn. If only it were that simple. If only she were running from something she could escape, rather than responsibilities that followed. Her like shadows. "Jack," she started, not sure what she was going to say, when the diner's door chimed. Mrs. Davis hurried in, making a beeline for their booth. "Jack, Elena, have you seen the big news?" She thrust a tablet at them. A rare sight. In Pine Grove, on the screen, was a Forbes article about the Wu International merger. Elena's stomach dropped as she saw her own photo, taken at last year's shareholders' meeting, staring back at her. But Mrs. Davis wasn't looking at the photo. Instead, she was pointing at the stock prices. "My Henry always said to invest in good people, and that Matthews woman has doubled our retirement fund. Can you believe it?" Elena held her breath, but Mrs. Davis just continued chattering about investments, never making the connection between the polished CEO in the photo and the woman sitting in the diner's booth. Jack, however, had gone very quiet. "Quite a responsibility," he said finally, "having that many people depending on your decisions." Elena couldn't meet his eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "it would be." The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. Elena caught Sarah Chen taking photos of the garage from across the street. She overheard whispers at the grocery store about the mysterious woman staying at Mrs. Henderson's. Even Mr. Wilson at the bookstore asked more questions than usual about her work in business management. That evening, pacing in her room, Elena made 3 calls to her legal team about preemptively suppressing any stories about her whereabouts. But as she watched the sun set over Pine Grove from her window, she wondered if she was fighting the inevitable. In the distance, she could see the lights on in Jack's garage. He was working late again, probably helping someone who couldn't afford regular rates. She thought about his words at the diner, about the town protecting its own. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She wasn't really one of them. And soon, too soon, everyone would know exactly who she was. Sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Elena helped Jack close up the garage. She'd spent another day learning about engines and carburetors, trying to ignore Sarah Chen's occasional drive-bys and the growing whispers in town. But now, in the quiet of the closing garage, those worries seemed to fade. "Want to see something?" Jack asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Without waiting for an answer, he led her to a tarp-covered shape in the corner of the garage. With a flourish, he pulled the cover off, revealing a partially restored classic Mustang. "It was my dad's," he said, running his hand along the fender. "His pride and joy. We were restoring it together when he got sick." His voice carried the weight of memory. "Cancer. Went quick, at least. But we never finished the car." Elena moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. "How long ago?" 3 years. This September." Jack opened the driver's door, the hinges creaking slightly. "Some days I work on it a little, other days feels wrong doing it without him." Elena thought about her own father, about the massive oak desk in her office that had once been his. "I lost my father too," she said softly. This, at least, was a truth she could share. "He built this amazing legacy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing it justice." Jack looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with magazine covers or business profiles. "Is that what you're running from?" he asked gently. "The weight of expectations?" She laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Something like that. Come here." He took her hand, leading her to the car. "Sit behind the wheel." Elena slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and cracked beneath her. Jack closed the door and walked around to the passenger side, getting in beside her. In the confined space, his presence felt overwhelming, all warmth and motor oil and quiet strength. "My dad used to say that a car is just metal and rubber until you put your heart into it," Jack said. "Then it becomes something more, a story, a memory, a dream." He turned to face her. What's your dream, Elena? Not your father's legacy, not other people's expectations, yours. The question hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? When was the last time she'd asked herself? I don't know anymore, she whispered. I've spent so long being what everyone needed me to be. Hey. Jack's hand found hers in the growing darkness. Maybe that's why you ended up here. Sometimes you need to get lost to find yourself. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. Elena knew she should pull away. Every second of contact only made the inevitable revelation more painful. Instead, she found herself talking. When I was little, I used to dream about running a flower shop, she admitted. Something small, simple, beautiful. My father laughed when I told him, said I was meant for bigger things. And were you meant for bigger things? Elena thought about the billions of dollars that moved at her command, the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended on her decisions. I became what I was supposed to be, she said carefully. Good at it too. But sometimes, the bigger things feel smaller than the simple ones, Jack finished. His hand tightened on hers. You know, there's a vacant shop next to the hardware store. Used to be a florist, actually, until Mrs. Green retired last year. The implied possibility hung in the air between them. Elena could almost see it. A small shop with big windows, filled with flowers and sunlight. A life measured in blooms. Rather than stock prices, a future where she could just be Eleanor. But the fantasy shattered as her phone buzzed again. Reality, calling as it always did. Jack, she started, needing to say something, anything, to bridge the gap between who she was and who she wished she could be. But he just squeezed her hand once more before letting go. Some dreams take time, he said quietly, and some secrets need to be kept until we're ready to face them. In the deepening twilight of the garage, surrounded by the ghosts of their fathers and the weight of things unsaid, Elena realized she was falling in love with him. And that knowledge was the most terrifying thing of all. Another perfect summer evening descended on Pine Grove, but this time Elena wasn't at Mrs. Henderson's or the garage. Instead, she sat on a checkered blanket beside Jack at his thinking spot on the hill, watching the sun paint the sky in impossible colors. A simple picnic basket lay between them, sandwiches from Sally's diner, fresh strawberries from the local market, and 2 bottles of root beer that Jack swore were the best in 3 counties. My mother would die if she saw me eating. On her blanket, Elena said, then immediately regretted mentioning anything about her real life. But Jack just smiled. Sounds like she hasn't lived enough then, he replied, popping a strawberry into his mouth. Some of the best moments in life happen on blankets. The way he looked at her when he said it made Eleanor's heart skip. She'd sat through million-dollar dinners in restaurants with more Michelin stars than she could count, but none of them felt as special as this simple meal on a hillside. Tell me something true, Jack said suddenly, turning to face her. The setting sun caught the gold flecks in his eyes, making them glow. Something nobody else knows about you. Elena's throat tightened. Everything about her was public knowledge, her net worth, her business achievements, her dating history. But maybe there were still some truths she could share. I'm afraid of thunderstorms, she admitted softly. Not because of the lightning or noise, but because they remind me of the night my father died. There was a huge storm, and I was stuck in traffic, trying to get to the hospital. She trailed off, the memory still sharp after all these years. Jack's hand found hers on the blanket, his palm warm and solid against her skin. I'm afraid of leaving, he said quietly, of trying something new and failing. That's why I never left Pine Grove, even when everyone said I was wasting my potential staying here to run a small-town garage. You're not wasting anything, Elena, said fiercely. "What you do here, how you help people, it matters." "Yeah." His thumb traced circles on her wrist, sending shivers up her arm. "And what about you? Are you living the life you want, or the life someone else wanted for you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elena looked out over Pine Grove, its lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. From up here, she could see Jack's garage, Mrs. Henderson's B&B, the whole tapestry of small-town life that had somehow become more real to her than the empire she'd built. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "Everything I've built, everything I've achieved. Sometimes it feels like a costume I can't take off." "I know who you are." Jack's voice was low, intense. She turned to find him much closer than before, close enough to see the day's stubble on his jaw, to smell the mix of motor oil and summer air on his skin. "You're the woman who spends hours learning about engines just because she's curious, who brings coffee to grumpy mechanics in the morning, who lights up when she talks about flowers." His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and Elena felt the last of her defenses crumbling. "Jack!" He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Elena's eyes fluttered closed, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. His breath whispered across her lips, and for one perfect moment, nothing else mattered. Not her company, not her secrets, not the weight of expectations she'd carried for so long. "Jack, you up there?" Mr. Peterson's voice shattered the moment like glass. "My truck's making that noise again." They sprang apart as the old man's flashlight beams swept up the hill. Elena's hands trembled as she smoothed her hair, her almost kiss with Jack still tingling on her lips like a promise unfulfilled. "I should—" Jack gestured vaguely toward the voice, his own composure clearly shaken. "Go," Elena said softly. "People need you." He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Eleanor, whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid to tell me, it doesn't change what I see when I look at you." She watched him descend the hill to help Mr. Peterson, her heart so full it hurt. If only he knew. If only she could believe that her truth wouldn't change everything. The stars were beginning to emerge overhead, ancient and indifferent to her troubles. Elena hugged her knees to her chest, remembering the warmth of Jack's almost kiss, knowing she should leave Pine Grove before she broke both their hearts. But as she gathered the picnic blanket, carefully folding it the way Jack had shown her, she realized something that terrified her more than any business crisis ever had. She didn't want to leave. For the first time in her life, she wanted to stay exactly where she was. Secrets and responsibilities be damned. The call came at dawn, shattering the peaceful quiet of Mrs. Henderson's B&B. Elena was already awake, sitting by her window and thinking about almost kisses and starlit confessions, when her CFO's number flashed across her screen. "Turn on the news," Thomas said without preamble. "Wu International just announced a merger with Richardson Global. They're saying you've been unreachable, unstable. The stock is plummeting." Elena's hands shook as she opened her laptop, pulling up the financial news. There it was, splashed across every major business site. Matthews Corp CEO MIA during critical merger negotiations. Her photo was everywhere, alongside speculation about her absence and its implications for the company's future. "The board is calling an emergency meeting," Thomas continued. "They're talking about a vote of no confidence. Elena, where are you?" She looked out her window at Pine Grove, awakening to another simple morning. Jack's garage lights were already on. He always started early on Thursdays. "I'm handling it," she said, her CEO voice sliding back into place. "Set up a video conference. Full board, 1 hour." The next 45 minutes were a blur of preparation. Elena changed into the one business suit she'd brought with her, just in case, and applied makeup with practiced precision. She couldn't risk doing the video call from her room. Mrs. Henderson was already up, and the walls were too thin for this kind of conversation. There was only one place she could think of that would be empty this early. The library didn't open until 9, but Mr. Wilson had given her a key last week, saying she seemed like someone who understood the sanctity of books. Now she let herself into the silent building, set up her laptop in the reference section, and prepared to fight for her company. The board meeting was brutal. 8 faces stared at her through the screen, each one questioning her judgment, her commitment, her ability to lead. Elena met their challenges head-on, her voice never wavering as she laid out her strategy for countering Richardson Global's move. "Gentlemen," she said, her tone arctic, "I've doubled this company's value in 5 years. I've navigated 3 global recessions and emerged stronger each time. If you think I'm going to let Richardson's cheap publicity stunt destroy everything we've built, you don't know me at all." She was so focused on the screen she didn't hear the library door open. "Elena?" Jack's voice hit her like a physical blow. "Mr. Wilson said you might be here. I brought coffee." She turned to find him frozen in the doorway, taking in her transformation, the power suit, the perfect makeup, the way she sat like someone used to commanding rooms. On her laptop screen, one of the board members leaned forward. "Ms. Matthews, is everything all right?" The silence stretched for an eternal moment. Jack's eyes moved from Elena to the screen and back, understanding dawning in his expression. "Everything's fine," Elena said smoothly, though her heart was shattering. "Just the local mechanic with a building maintenance issue. Now, about the Woo International counteroffer." She watched Jack back away slowly, the coffee cup still in his hands, his face unreadable. She wanted to run after him, to explain, to beg him to understand. Instead, she turned back to her screen and continued outlining hostile takeover defenses to men who made more money in an hour than Jack saw in a year. The meeting lasted another 30 minutes. By the end, she'd stabilized the stock price and bought herself a week to salvage the Woo International deal. A victory by any corporate standard, but as she sat alone in the silent library, surrounded by books and the ghost of Jack's presence, Eleanor had never felt more like a failure. Her phone buzzed. Another crisis, another decision needed. The world she'd built was demanding her attention, pulling her back into its orbit of power plays and billion-dollar decisions. She had responsibilities, employees depending on her, shareholders to answer to, but for the first time in her career, the weight of those responsibilities felt less like an achievement and more like a prison. Through the library window, she could see Jack's garage across the street. He was working on Mrs. Davis's car again, his movements precise and purposeful. Even from here, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he deliberately didn't look toward the library. Elena touched her fingers to the window, tracing his outline against the morning sun. In trying to protect her secret, she'd just lost something far more valuable than any merger deal. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The Pine Grove Gazette's headline screamed across the front page, "Billionaire CEO Elena Matthews discovered in Pine Grove." Sarah Chen's article filled the entire front page, complete with photos. Elena at the diner, at the garage, walking with Jack. The final photo showed her in the library window during yesterday's video conference, looking every inch the powerful CEO she truly was. Elena stood in Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, the paper trembling in her hands. The elderly innkeeper quietly placed a cup of tea beside her. "I wondered when this would come out," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "Known since the second day, actually. My late husband was quite the investor, had your photo hanging in his study." Eleanor's head snapped up. "You knew all this time? Honey, half the town suspected something, but we figured you had your reasons." She patted Eleanor's hand. "Though I'm guessing Jack wasn't among those who knew." As if summoned by his name, the sound of Jack's tow truck rumbled past the B&B. Elena rushed to the window, but he drove by without slowing, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Her phone had been ringing non-stop since dawn. News vans from 3 different networks were parked at the town limits. But all Elena could think about was the look on Jack's face in the library, the moment trust shattered. "I have to talk to him," she said. "Might want to go through the back door," Mrs. Henderson suggested, already reaching for her keys. "I'll drive you. Less chance of running into Sarah Chen that way." The garage was quiet when they pulled up behind it. Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand once before driving away, leaving Elena to face what she'd done. She found Jack in his office. Really, just a small room off the main garage, with a desk he rarely used. He was standing at the window, his back to the door, a copy of the Gazette crushed in his hand. "Your car's ready," he said without turning around. "No charge. I'm sure you can afford it, but I'd rather not have your money." "Jack, please." "Elena." "Matthews." He finally turned, and the pain in his eyes felt like a physical blow. Or should I say Ms. Matthews, CEO of Matthews Global Industries, named one of Time's most influential people, estimated net worth $4.7 billion. He tossed the paper onto his desk. "Did I miss anything?" "My name," she said quietly. "You didn't miss my name. I'm still Elena. Are you?" He took a step toward her, and she could see the hurt warring with anger in his expression. "Because the Elena I knew wouldn't lie to everyone for weeks, wouldn't pretend to be something she's not, wouldn't," his voice caught, "wouldn't let me fall for someone who doesn't really exist." "Everything I felt was real," Elena whispered. "Everything we shared." "Like what?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "The stories about struggling with your father's expectations. Just a CEO with daddy issues. Learning about cars, probably some rich person's idea of playing poor. That night on the hill." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Was any of it real, Elena? Or was this all just a billionaire's vacation from her real life?" "You think I was playing?" Heat crept into Elena's voice. "You think I didn't? Wake up every morning terrified that today would be the day I lost. Lost this, lost you. Everything here, the simplicity, the honesty, the way people care about each other without agenda. It's more real than anything in my world. Then why lie? Because for the first time in my life, someone was seeing me. Not my money, not my company, not my family name, just me." The tears she'd been holding back all morning finally spilled over. "Do you know what it's like to never know if people like you or what you can do for them? To always wonder if every smile, every kindness comes with a price tag?" Something flickered in Jack's eyes. Understanding, maybe, or pity. Either way, it hurt. "Mrs. Davis needs her car looked at," he said, finally turning away. "You should go. I'm sure you have a company to run." "Jack!" "Just go, Elena, before Sarah Chen comes back with more photographers. I'm sure the last thing your shareholders want to see is their CEO crying in a small-town garage." Elena stood there for a moment longer, memorizing the line of his shoulders, the way the morning light caught the grey, starting at his temples, the organizing system for tools she'd helped him create last week. All the small details that had become so precious to her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "not for who I am, but for not trusting you with the truth." She was almost to the door when his voice stopped her. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Eleanor closed, her eyes against fresh tears. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that once you knew the whole truth, everything would change. Afraid that when you looked at me, you'd see what everyone else sees, the money, the power, the Matthews name. Afraid you'd stop seeing just Elena." She paused. "I was right to be afraid, wasn't I?" She didn't wait for his answer. The sound of the garage door closing behind her felt like the period at the end of a story she'd never meant to write. Pine Grove transformed overnight. News vans lined the main street, reporters cluttered the sidewalks, and smartphones appeared everywhere, hoping to catch a glimpse of the billionaire CEO who'd been hiding in their midst. Sally's diner had never seen such business, though most customers seemed more interested in photographing Elena's usual booth than ordering actual food. Elena watched it all from her room at Mrs. Henderson's, feeling like a prisoner in a tower of her own making. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Board members, shareholders, journalists, even her mother, demanding to know what she thought she was doing in some backward little town. A soft knock at her door revealed Mrs. Henderson with a tray of tea and scones. "Thought you might need something sweet," she said, settling into the room's reading chair. "The vultures still circling?" Elena peered through the lace curtains at the reporters below. "I've ruined everything for this town, haven't I? The peace, the quiet." "Nonsense," Mrs. Henderson sniffed. "Give it a week. Some celebrity will do something scandalous, and they'll all flutter off to the next story." She poured tea into delicate cups. "Though I dare say you've given Pine Grove enough gossip to last a decade." Through the window, Eleanor could see Jack's garage. He'd closed early today, the first time she'd ever seen his closed sign up during business hours. The sight made her chest ache. "He won't even look at me," she whispered. "Can you blame him?" Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle but firm. "Jack Morrison's built his whole life on honesty. His father taught him that a man's word is his bond. Finding out someone he cared for deeply wasn't honest with him. Well, that cuts deep." A commotion outside drew their attention. Sarah Chen was interviewing Mr. Peterson on the sidewalk, her recorder thrust toward his face. "Oh, she was always putting on airs," the old man was saying, though Elena had never heard him speak unkindly before. "Acting like she was interested in our little town. Suppose she was just slumming it, having a laugh at us simple folk." Elena stepped back from the window, feeling sick. Mrs. Henderson clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Don't you mind Herbert Peterson," she said. "Last week he was singing your praises about helping him with his groceries. Amazing how money changes people's memories." "That's just it, isn't it?" Eleanor sank onto her bed. "Money changes everything. How people see you, how they act around you, what they expect from you." She picked up her laptop, where emails from her board demanded her immediate return to New York. "Maybe it's better if I just go." "Is that what you want?" Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes studied her. "Or is it just easier than staying and fighting for what matters?" Before Eleanor could answer, shouts from outside drew them back to the window. Jack had emerged from his garage and was confronting Sarah Chen, who'd been trying to peer through his windows. "This is private property," his voice carried clearly in the afternoon air. "And I have nothing to say about Elena Matthews or anyone else." "But surely you feel betrayed," Sarah pressed. "The whole town's talking about how she fooled you, made you think she was just another—" "The whole town needs to mind its own business," Jack cut her off. "And so do you." Elena watched him stride back into his garage, his shoulders rigid with tension. Even now, even hurt as he was still protecting her. The realization made her heart twist. Her phone buzzed again. Thomas, her CFO, warning that Richardson Global was making another move on Wu International. Her corporate world was spiraling, demanding her attention, requiring the Elena Matthews who commanded boardrooms and brokered billion-dollar deals. But for the first time in her career, Elena found herself questioning which world was real. The one she'd built with wealth and power, or the one she'd found here in Pine Grove, helping Jack organize tools and drinking coffee on his thinking hill. "Mrs. Henderson," she said slowly, "what would you do if you had to choose between the life you built and the life you discovered you wanted?" The older woman smiled, gathering the tea things. "My dear, the fact that you're asking that question means you already know the answer." She paused at the door. "The question is, are you brave enough to act on it?" Eleanor looked down at her phone. Then back out at Jack's garage. She thought about the Elena Matthews who ruled the corporate world, and the Elena who'd found peace in a small-town garage. Both were real. Both were her. The question was, which one did she want to be? Jack sat in his father's old office chair, staring at his computer screen. He'd never been one for internet searches or social media, but today he found himself typing Elena Matthews into Google. The results were overwhelming. Business articles, charity galas, corporate profiles, but it was a small local news story from 3 years ago that caught his eye. Matthews Corp CEO secretly funds small business recovery after hurricane, the headline read. The article detailed how Elena had anonymously provided grants to dozens of family-owned businesses destroyed by the storm, with one condition, that her involvement remained secret. As he dug deeper, he found more stories. A children's hospital wing funded without fanfare, a scholarship program for first-generation college students, a network of women's shelters supported through private donations. All done quietly, many anonymously, none with the publicity stunts typical of billionaire philanthropy. Thought I might find you doing research. Mr. Wilson's voice made Jack look up. The librarian stood in the garage doorway, a stack of newspapers under his arm. Figured you might want to see these. He spread out several editions of the Pine Grove Gazette from the past few weeks. There was Elena helping Mrs. Davis with her groceries, Elena reading to kids during the library's story hour, Elena changing Mrs. Peterson's flat tire in the rain. She did all that while running a global corporation, Mr. Wilson said quietly. Those early morning calls she made, she was handling a merger crisis in China. Those late nights, board meetings and investor calls, but she still found time to help Betty at the pharmacy organize her inventory. Jack picked up a photo of Elena teaching local kids about car engines in his garage. Her smile in it was genuine, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Why didn't you tell me who she was? Wasn't my secret to tell. Mr. Wilson adjusted his glasses. Besides, would it have been better to know from the start? Would you have treated her the same, talked to her the same, fallen for her the same, if you'd known she could buy this whole town without blinking? The question hit Jack like a physical blow. He thought about their conversations, their shared moments, the almost kiss on the hill. Would he have allowed himself to be so open, so vulnerable, if he'd known who she really was? She lied to me, he said, but the words lacked their earlier conviction. Did she? Mr. Wilson pulled up a stool. Or did she just let you see the part of her that never gets to come out in her other life? The part that wants to help people directly, with her hands and heart, rather than just her checkbook? Through the garage windows, Jack could see reporters still lingering on the street. One was interviewing Mr. Peterson again, who now seemed to be telling a different story about how Elena had helped his granddaughter apply for college scholarships. You know what your father used to say about engines, Mr. Wilson continued. Sometimes what looks like a breakdown is just something. Trying to break through, Jack's eyes fell on the half-restored Mustang in the corner. He remembered Elena's face when he told her about working on it with his dad, the way she'd understood the weight of legacy and expectations. Had she been thinking about her own father then, her own inherited responsibilities? I saw her portfolio. You know, Mr. Wilson said, standing to leave. The one she was planning before all this blew up. She was researching how to invest in Pine Grove, not to change it, but to protect it. Small business grants, historical preservation funds, scholarships for local kids, all structured to maintain the town's character while helping it thrive. He paused at the door. She wasn't just hiding here, Jack. She was finding herself. And maybe, just maybe, she was finding something worth changing her whole life for. After Mr. Wilson left, Jack sat for a long time, looking at the photos spread across his desk. Elena Matthews, billionaire CEO, could have spent her unexpected small-town stay in luxury and isolation. Instead, she'd chosen to immerse herself, in community, to help where she could, to learn and give and grow. Just like she'd been doing her whole life, he realized, looking back at the articles about her quiet charitable works. The only difference was that in Pine Grove, for a few precious weeks, she'd gotten to do it as herself. His eyes fell on the last photo. Eleanor laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, both of them covered in engine grease. The woman in that photo was real, he realized. The question was, had he been too hurt by the lie to see the truth behind it? Elena stood at her bedroom window at Mrs. Henderson's, watching the sun rise over Pine Grove one last time. Her suitcase lay packed on the bed, her brief escape into normalcy about to end. The morning news showed Matthew's corp stock stabilizing, but only after she'd announced her imminent return to New York. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Board meeting in 4 hours. Car waiting at town limits to avoid press. Wu international representatives expect to meet today. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, remembering another sunrise watched from Jack's thinking spot on the hill. Everything had seemed possible then, sitting beside him on that wooden bench, dreaming about flower shops and simple lives. A knock at her door made her turn. Mrs. Henderson entered, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Betty, from the pharmacy, Margaret Davis, and several other townspeople Elena had come to know during her stay. "We heard you were leaving," Betty said, stepping forward. "We couldn't let you go without saying goodbye. And without telling you what you've done for us," Margaret added, her eyes warm. "My granddaughter used your advice about college applications. She got into her first choice." One by one, they shared stories. Small moments Elena had almost forgotten. Teaching the Wilson kids basic car maintenance at Jack's garage, helping Mr. Peterson navigate his retirement accounts, showing Sally how to modernize her diner's bookkeeping. "You didn't do any of those things because you were Eleanor Matthews, CEO," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "You did them because you're Elena, who cares." Elena's vision blurred with tears. "I have responsibilities," she whispered. "People depending on me." "You have responsibilities here too," Betty replied. "To yourself, if nothing else. To the life you could build." Through the window, Eleanor saw Jack's garage opening for the day. Her heart clenched as she remembered their last conversation, the pain in his eyes when he'd told her to leave. Her phone buzzed again, Thomas sending the day's schedule. Board meeting, Wu international negotiations, press conference, shareholder, and calls. The machinery of her corporate life spinning back up, ready to reclaim her. "I don't know how to be both," Elena admitted. "The CEO they need and the person I found here. Maybe you don't have to choose," a new voice said. Elena turned to find Sarah Chen in the doorway, notebook in hand. The reporter looked uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been doing more research," Sarah continued, "about your company's community investment programs, your charitable foundation. You've always tried to help small towns like Pine Grove, haven't you? Just from a distance, through corporate initiatives and anonymous donations." "It's not the same," Elena said. "No," Sarah agreed. "It's not. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Pine Grove happened for a reason. Maybe it's showing you a different way to use your position, your influence." Elena's mind raced. She thought about the investment portfolio she'd started planning for Pine Grove, about similar towns struggling to maintain their character in a changing economy, about the power she wielded as CEO and how it could be used to protect places like this rather than exploit them. Her phone buzzed one final time. The board was calling an emergency vote on her leadership, citing her erratic behavior and concerning priorities. In 4 hours, she could be in New York, reclaiming her corporate throne, returning to the life she'd spent years building. Or, "Mrs. Henderson," Elena said slowly, "does that vacant shop next to the hardware store still need a tenant?" The older woman's eyes sparkled. "Why, yes. Yes, it does. And Mr. Wilson," Elena turned to the librarian, "the Historical Society still needs funding for preservation projects?" He nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. Elena picked up her phone, but instead of answering the board's messages, she opened her contact list. Thomas, call everyone in. Emergency strategy meeting. I'm about to redefine corporate social responsibility, and the board can either get on board or find themselves a new CEO. She looked around at the faces of people who'd known her secret and kept it, who'd seen her heart before her net worth. Then her eyes drifted to Jack's garage across the street. Some choices weren't really choices at all. Sometimes they were just recognizing the truth you'd known all along. The Matthews Corp boardroom fell silent as Eleanor walked in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. 12 pairs of eyes watched her take her place at the head of the table, most already decided against her. The vote of no confidence lay, like a weapon on the polished surface waiting to be wielded. Before we begin, Elena said, her voice steady, I'd like you to meet someone. The door opened and Jack Morrison walked in. He'd traded his usual coveralls for a suit that Elena could tell was borrowed, probably from Mr. Wilson's son. His hands, scrubbed clean but still bearing the honest calluses of his work, held a thick folder. This is Jack Morrison, Eleanor continued, watching shock ripple through the board members' faces. And he's about to show you the future of Matthews Corp. Jack stepped forward, spreading photographs and documents across the table. Pine Grove isn't just a small town, he began, his voice carrying the same confidence he used when explaining engines. It's a model, a blueprint for how corporate power can protect and enhance community values instead of destroying them. Elena watched him present the investment strategy they'd stayed up all night developing. A plan to create a network of small-town revitalization projects, combining Matthews Corp's resources with local knowledge and values. His hands moved over the projections and proposals with the same sure touch he used on engines, finding the connecting points, showing how everything could work together. We're not just talking about PR-friendly charity, Jack continued. We're talking about sustainable investment in America's backbone. Small businesses, historical preservation, educational opportunities, all structured to maintain local character while creating growth. Thomas, Eleanor's CFO, leaned forward. The costs will be offset by tax benefits, positive press, and the creation of stable long-term investment opportunities, Elena cut in. More importantly, it's the right thing to do. And it's what this company was founded to do. She pulled out an old photograph, her father standing in front of his first hardware store. Before Matthews Corp became a global entity, it was a small business in a small town. My father never forgot that, neither should we. Pretty speeches, Richardson drawled from the end of the table. But Wu International isn't interested in small-town charity. They want stability, guaranteed returns. Actually, Jack pulled out his phone. They're very interested. Mr. Wu, are you ready? The screen lit up with a video call, revealing the elderly CEO of Wu International. Ms. Matthews, he said, smiling. Mr. Morrison has shown me his town, shown me how American small business still has heart, still has honor. This is partnership we want, not just money, but values. Elena felt tears threatening but held them back. She hadn't known Jack had been talking to Wu International, hadn't known he'd been fighting for her vision while she was fighting for her position. The vote, she said, facing her board, is yours to make. But understand this. I am Elena Matthews, CEO of this company and daughter of its founder, and I will not choose between effective leadership and ethical investment. If you want my resignation, you'll have it. But you'll also have to explain to our shareholders and the public why you pushed out a CEO who just secured the Wu International merger while simultaneously creating a revolutionary community investment. Program. She reached for Jack's hand under the table, found it waiting for hers. Or you can join us in transforming this company into something that measures success not just in dollars, but in lives improved and communities preserved. The silence stretched, Then Thomas picked up the vote of no confidence document and deliberately tore it in half. "I've served 3 CEOs of Matthews Corp," he said. "This is the first time I've seen one truly honor Charles Matthews' vision." One by one, the board members nodded. Even Richardson gave a grudging shrug of acceptance. "Well then," Elena smiled, squeezing Jack's hand. "Shall we begin?" Later, standing in the elevator together, Jack finally asked the question that had been hanging between them. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" Eleanor turned to face him. "Because for the first time in my life, someone was seeing who I really was instead of what I was. The irony is, you helped me see it too." Jack's hand came up to cup her cheek, just as it had that night on the hill. "I see you now," he said softly. "All of you. And I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner." This time, when he leaned in, there was no one to interrupt their kiss. 3 months after the board meeting, Pine Grove's main street hummed with activity. The vacant shop next to the hardware store had transformed into Eleanor's Blooms. Elena's childhood dream turned reality, managed by Betty's daughter, while Elena split her time between New York and Pine Grove. But it wasn't just the flower shop that had changed. The Matthews Foundation's small-town initiative had made Pine Grove its pilot project. Historic buildings were being carefully restored, small business owners received grants for modernization, and a scholarship program ensured local kids could afford college. Most importantly, everything was done with the town's character in mind. Elena sat in her usual booth at Sally's Diner, laptop open to quarterly reports, while the smell of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. The diner had new equipment in the kitchen and an updated accounting system, but Sally still served the same recipes her grandmother had used. "More coffee, boss lady?" Sally asked with a wink, already pouring. "Just Elena here," she reminded her, smiling. The town had finally found a balance between who she was and what she did. She wasn't just the billionaire CEO or just the girl who'd helped organize the diner's receipts. She was both, and that was okay. The bell above the door chimed, and Jack walked in, coveralls stained with the day's work. He slid into the booth across from her, stealing a sip of her coffee. "How's the expansion going?" Elena asked. The garage was growing, adding a training program for local youth interested in mechanics. "Got the new lift installed today," he said. "And Marcus is picking up the work faster than I did at his age." His eyes crinkled with pride, talking about his first apprentice. "How's the corporate world?" Elena gestured to her laptop. "Woo International is fully on board with the initiative. We're looking at expanding to 5 more towns next quarter." She paused, then added softly, "Dad would have loved this." Jack reached across the table to take her hand. "He'd be proud of you, both sides of you." Through the window, they could see Mr. Peterson showing a group of suits around town, representatives from other communities interested in the Matthews Foundation program. The old man had become one of their strongest advocates, proudly sharing how the initiative had helped his granddaughter attend engineering school. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real," Elena admitted, "running a global corporation and a small-town flower shop, living in a penthouse and a B&B. Speaking of which," Jack's thumb traced circles on her palm, "Mrs. Henderson mentioned the old Miller house is up for sale. The Victorian on Oak Street needs some work, but—" Elena's heart skipped. "Are you asking me to put down roots, Mr. Morrison?" "Maybe." His eyes held that warmth she'd fallen in love with. "The commute to New York would be longer than from the B&B, but the garage is within walking distance, and it has a garden." Before Eleanor could respond, Sarah Chen appeared at their table, notebook in hand. But instead of the eager reporter who'd once chased scandal, she now headed the Foundation's community outreach program. "Sorry to interrupt the moment," she said, not looking sorry at all. "But the Silicon Valley people are here early. They want to know how we're balancing technological advancement with small-town preservation." Eleanor squeezed Jack's hand before letting go. "Tell them to meet me at the garage. They need to understand this isn't about imposing change. It's about enhancing what's already special." As she gathered her things, Jack caught her arm. "Dinner tonight, up on the hill, with root beer and turkey sandwiches." Elena smiled, remembering their almost first kiss. "Actually," he pulled out a small velvet box, "I had something else in mind." Elena's breath caught as she recognized what it was. Around them, the diner fell silent, Sally, Sarah, and several regulars, all pretending not to watch. "You don't have to choose," Jack said softly, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Between being Eleanor Matthews, CEO, and just Eleanor, between New York and Pine Grove, between your father's legacy and your own dreams, you can be all of it, and I want to be beside you for all of it." Tears blurred Eleanor's vision as she looked at the man who had seen through her disguise to her true self and loved both versions of her. The Miller house on Oak Street slowly came back to life under Jack and Elena's care. Like their relationship, it was a blend of two worlds. The elegant Victorian architecture restored with Jack's mechanical precision and Elena's eye for detail. The garden bloomed with flowers from Eleanor's blooms, and the garage housed both Elena's corporate car and Jack's beloved Mustang, finally completed with her help. Pine Grove had adjusted to its unique position as home to both a small-town mechanic and a global CEO. The town's children no longer saw any contradiction in the fact that Miss Elena could fix their bikes alongside Mr. Jack and then hop on a video call with international executives. "The Japanese investors are impressed with the quarterly returns," Elena said one morning, walking from the house to Jack's garage. She'd learned to do her early calls while walking through town, combining corporate duties with community presence. "But they're more interested in how we're implementing the small-town initiative in their rural areas." Jack looked up from under the hood of a car, his wedding ring catching the morning light. "Tell them what you told the German group. It's not about copying Pine Grove. It's about finding what makes each community special and building on that." Elena smiled, remembering how far they'd come from her first days pretending to be just another stranded traveler. Now, she moved effortlessly between helping Jack with a difficult repair and leading a board meeting, between arranging flowers in her shop and negotiating international deals. The town had become her sanctuary, not her hiding place. 3 days a week, she worked from Pine Grove, holding meetings in the library's newly renovated conference room or the diner's private booth. The other days, she ran Matthews Corp from New York, always returning home to Jack and their Victorian house with its thriving garden. "Did you see today's Gazette?" Jack asked, handing her the local paper. Sarah Chen's article detailed the success of the first graduating class from the garage's training program. Marcus, Jack's first apprentice, beamed from the front page, standing in front of his own newly opened repair shop in the next town over. "Speaking of success stories," Eleanor said, "Betty's daughter is ready to take over full management of Eleanor's blooms. I think it's time we opened a second location." Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag, giving her that smile that still made her heart skip. "In New York?" "Maybe," she leaned against his workbench. "But I was thinking more about that empty storefront. In Marcus's town, keep it in the family, so to speak." Family had taken on new meaning in Pine Grove. Mrs. Henderson had officially become Aunt May after hosting their wedding in her B&B's garden. Mr. Wilson was Uncle Pete to the local kids who now had college dreams thanks to the Matthews Foundation, scholarships. Even Sarah Chen had become a close friend, her investigative skills now directed toward finding communities that could benefit from their program. The door chimed as Mr. Peterson walked in, no longer needing his cane thanks to the hip surgery Elena's health initiative had helped fund. "You two coming to the town meeting tonight? We're voting on the new community center plans." "Wouldn't miss it," Jack said. Elena's got some ideas about combining a technology lab with a traditional workshop space. Modern skills with traditional values, Elena added, just like everything else we do here. After Mr. Peterson left, Jack pulled Elena close, not caring about the grease on his coveralls. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About choosing this life?" Elena looked around the garage where their story had begun, then out at the town that had helped her find herself. Through the window, she could see her flower shop, the restored historical buildings, and the busy main street where everyone still waved to each other by name. "I didn't choose this life," she said, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I chose to stop pretending I couldn't have both lives, to stop hiding parts of myself and start combining them instead." Jack's kiss tasted like coffee and possibility, like morning meetings and evening drives in his Mustang, like billion-dollar deals and small-town kindness, like love that saw all of her and chose all of her. 1 year later, the autumn fair transformed Pine Grove's main street into a celebration of everything the town had become. Local artisans displayed their crafts alongside tech startup booths run by recent graduates of the Matthews Foundation. Programs. The smell of Sally's famous apple pie mixed with coffee from the new roastery, while children darted between vintage cars restored at Jack's expanded garage. Elena stood on the library steps, watching it all with quiet pride. The Matthews Small Town Initiative had spread to 30 communities across the country, each finding its own unique balance between progress and preservation. But Pine Grove would always be special. It was where Elena Matthews had found herself, where a broken-down car had led to an unbroken heart. "Ready for your speech?" Jack appeared beside her, looking surprisingly comfortable in a suit. He'd gotten better at handling the corporate side of their life, just as she'd mastered the art of fixing engines in heels. Almost. Elena smoothed. Her dress, designer, but accessorized with a small flower from her shop. "Did the Woo International representatives arrive?" "Mrs. Henderson's got them settled at the B&B. Jack grinned. "She's already won them over with her blueberry pancakes. Some things never change, but some things had." The old Mustang, finally restored, gleamed in front of Jack's garage, now the headquarters of a regional training program for young mechanics. Elena's Blooms had expanded to 5 locations, each run by local managers who shared Elena's vision of bringing beauty to small towns. Sarah Chen waved from her new office across the street, where she directed both the town newspaper and the Foundation's community outreach program. Through the window, Elena could see Mr. Peterson teaching a group of business students about the importance of community investment. He'd become something of a local celebrity in economic development circles. "Remember when you first broke down here?" Jack asked, taking her hand. "Did you ever imagine this?" Elena looked at their intertwined fingers, his still bearing the honest calluses of mechanical work, hers equally comfortable with corporate contracts and garden soil. "I was running away," she admitted. "Instead, I found my way home." The crowd began gathering for the fair's opening ceremony. Elena saw familiar faces from both her worlds, board members chatting with local shop owners, international investors admiring homemade quilts, young entrepreneurs seeking advice from experienced small business owners. Marcus, now running his own successful garage, stood with his first apprentice. Betty's daughter had brought flowers from the newest Eleanor's Blooms location. Mrs. Henderson supervised the refreshments with her usual graceful efficiency, while Mr. Wilson showed off the library's combination of historical archives and cutting-edge technology. As Elena stepped up to the podium, she felt Jack's steady presence behind her. The speech she'd prepared seemed unnecessary as she looked out at the living proof of what happens when you stop choosing between two worlds and start building bridges between them. "A year ago," she began, "I thought I had to choose between being Elena Matthews, CEO, and just Elena from Pine Grove. I thought power and simplicity couldn't coexist, that success meant sacrificing authenticity. I was wrong. She gestured to the thriving main street, the restored buildings, the mix of tradition and innovation that made Pine Grove unique. We don't have to choose between preserving our past and embracing our future, between small-town values and global vision, between who we are and who we can become. Jack stepped forward to stand beside her, and Elena's heart still skipped at his proud smile. Sometimes, she continued, a breakdown is just life's way of showing you where you need to rebuild. Sometimes, getting lost is how you find your way home. And sometimes love isn't about choosing between two worlds. It's about building a new one together. As applause filled the air, Eleanor looked up at the thinking spot on the hill where she and Jack had almost shared their first kiss. The old bench was still there, now accompanied by a small gazebo where people could sit and overlook the town. Like everything else in Pine Grove, it honored the past while welcoming the future. Later that evening, after the speeches and celebrations, Elena and Jack drove the restored Mustang up to their spot. The town twinkled below them, its lights a warm reminder of community and connection. So, Jack said, pulling her close, was it worth it? The risk, the revelation, the rebuilding. Elena thought about the scared woman who'd once hidden in Pine Grove, running from her own power. She thought about the strength she'd found in vulnerability, the freedom in authenticity, the joy in combining all parts of herself into someone whole and real. Every moment, she whispered, reaching up to kiss her small-town